Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, today's chapters are Job 31 and John 19. Now in Job 31, Job basically assesses himself. He's bringing his defense to a conclusion, and his assessment of himself is that he's a good guy. He says, listen, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look at a woman lustfully. And he says, everyone can be the judge of that. If I have done that, let her go and work for another man and let other men sleep with her. He says, that's how convinced I am that I've been faithful to my wife. And then he says, if I have denied justice to my servants, did not he who made me in my mother's womb also make my servants? He demonstrates an incredible view of his servants and slaves, which is highly unusual in those days. And then he says this, if I've raised my hand against the fatherless, knowing that I have influence in court. In other words, have I used my position of power to, prejudice poor people? He says, if I've put my trust in gold, or put my trust in the sun and the moon and worship nature, he says, then these would be sins that should be judged. That's what verse 28 says. He says, have I rejoiced in my enemies' ill fortune? I haven't. I felt for my enemies when they've had bad fortune. Have I left a stranger to sleep in the street at night? No, I brought them in. Have I concealed my sin, as some people do, hiding it in their hearts, is what he says in verse 33. He says, no, I haven't done that. You know who this guy reminds me of? Do you remember that rich young man who went to Jesus and says, what do I need to do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says to him, you need to obey the commandments. And he says, since a young man, I have done that. Jesus doesn't dispute that he's a good guy. But he says, listen, there is a thing you lack. He says, what Job doesn't understand is that even our righteousness is like filthy rags in God's sight, isn't it? So even the best of the best is like so far short of what's necessary to please God. And so now let's go to John chapter 19. You see, John 19 is Jesus going to the cross. And we know that Jesus on the cross, taking Job's sin. Now I know Job didn't think he was such a bad guy, but he wasn't perfect. Jesus went to the cross for Job and for you and for me. And he made a way to the Father for us. And so what happens is, Jesus went to the cross because of the Father's will, not because of the Jewish leaders. And so, the Jewish leaders are saying to Pilate, crucify him, crucify him. We have a law. According to that law, he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God. And it says that Pilate became terrified when he heard that this was the Son of God. And so he goes in to question Jesus again. Where do you come from? And Jesus says, he doesn't answer him. He says, do you realize who I am? This is what Pilate says. Jesus says to him, listen, you would have no power over me unless it was given to you. Therefore, the one who has handed me over to you is guilty of a bigger sin than you. Now, Pilate's, had him, flogged him. Pilate at this point, it says he tried everything he could to stop him getting crucified. But, he's a bit of a limp-wristed guy, and he got swayed by the crowd. And Jesus is crucified. And Pilate has written above his head in 3 different languages, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Obviously, the Jews didn't like that. He said, rather say, he said, he is the King of the Jews. Pilate said, I've written what I've written. And Pilate had this, frightening encounter with Jesus. And then we see in his death, the fact that his legs weren't broken, the fact that his tunic wasn't torn, and that they cast lots for his clothes, that prophecies were fulfilled by his persecutors. You didn't even know they were fulfilling the prophecies. The 2 words that Jesus speaks as his final words are, I am thirsty. I am thirsty. He's on the cross. Why is he thirsty? Because he's representing our thirst. He's representing our nakedness. He's representing the whole of mankind. So he didn't hang there as God. He hung there as man. And then he says, it is finished. What's finished? My sacrifice for mankind is finished. And the way is made open. Now, what I'd like us to land with is this understanding of Joseph of Arimathea. It says Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent Pharisee, goes to Pilate and says, can I have his body? And it says that Joseph was a disciple, but secretly so, because he feared his peers who had killed Jesus. And it says that Joseph and Nicodemus, and it says the one who came to Jesus at night, that was in John chapter 3. These 2 Pharisees come to take Jesus' body off the cross. Where are the disciples at this point? Well, they've run away. Where are the women? Well, they've also run away. These two Pharisees carrying Jesus' body, wrapping him up. Imagine that. Imagine that. Risking their lives, risking their professions, risking everything. I think they both, you say, well, how did they meet Jesus? How did these Pharisees switch? Remember when Jesus spoke to Pharisees, he called them vipers, whitewashed tombs. But these two, the gospel, Jesus can reach the hardest of the hard. Just think a bit about those Pharisees, what it took them to be saved. An incredible ending to this chapter.